Everything that I learned as a physician, it went away as soon as my son was laying there. And it was, the first night that we were together as a family. Even though I know that I've been in the hospital so many times and I've held newborns so many times in my life, I still had to wake up every 15 to 20 minutes just to make sure he was still breathing.
I don't want them to just be a lawyer because daddy's a lawyer or get into real estate because mom and dad are in real estate. I want them to pursue what they want, but I also want it to be beneficial to society.
I definitely know many families and many women who were pregnant during medical school and residency. I have no idea how they did it because, again, I barely made it through as a man that didn't have to carry a baby for 9 months, but they were all amazing and they made it look so easy.
Medicine,
law, friendship. This is Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. You're listening to the Medico-Legal Brief.
one doctor, one lawyer, and a whole lot of gray area.
Welcome back to another episode, everyone, to the Medico-Legal Brief. We've got Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik here. And for those new who have never seen our episodes or our podcast before, it's a lawyer and a doctor having a conversation. We've known each other for a really long time, and we have these discussions on topics that bring in the medical side and the legal side. If you are interested and you want to keep up with all the episodes that come out in the future, please make sure you subscribe, like, comments. We like to interact. So how are you doing today, Nik?
I'm doing good. I have a question for you, a little behind the scenes podcast question. Whenever we talk about introducing ourselves, like Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik, I always have to pause to then get it right in my brain when I'm talking to our audience. I'm always like, wait, am I Dr. Nik and he's Lawyer Long? Lawyer Nik, Dr. Long? I swear it's every single time. So for our listeners, if you ever hear the slight, we're just trying to get us in order, get ourselves in order. I think it's absolutely hilarious because I do it all the time.
For me, it just is natural because I have to introduce myself as doctor. Yep. I can't imagine you going around telling people you're Lawyer Nik.
No,
ever.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. Nobody in the field. I've even had friends with the podcast. They come out and they say, wait, Lawyer Nik? It just has a nice ring to it. Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. Because if it was like Dr. Long and Nik, I mean, I'm just Nik at that point. But I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm just trying to run some last minute errands before I have to pick up the kids.
If you notice with the skeleton behind me, this is a good segue in our topic today about kiddos. We're getting ready to have a kid, but we're also in the holiday season. So my wife is up my ass about getting things down from the attic and getting the Halloween decorations out because she wants them up and she can't do any of it. She's not going to carry storage boxes. She's not going to do any of that stuff. So I'm bringing them all down. I'm trying to decorate, take direction, be a good direction taker, be a good hubby. But she's already warned me that the moment Halloween is over and done with, I am to put all the Christmas stuff up because at that point we are in the thick of that period of when we could have a child. And she wants to come home and Christmas be done. She doesn't want to worry about it.
That's so funny because this is actually our first year. So I have a 4-year-old and an almost 2-year-old. This will be our first year where we truly will be celebrating all the holidays. We're going to do the Halloween stuff. We're going to do the Thanksgiving, and we're going to have our first Christmas tree as a family together this year. And we're not going to be traveling like we have in the other years. But that leads into like you said, our conversation today, which is going to be about having kids, what it's like to have kids, raise kids as professionals, especially specifically where it's close to home, where I'm a doctor, and what it's like to have to raise a kid as a lawyer.
When we're looking at kiddos, it's easy to look at your partner because for the most part, they're self-sufficient. They're able to contribute. They can go off and have their own job. If they leave the house and they want to go to the gym or if they want to go to the store, you don't really have to monitor them. To re-baseline, we are expecting a little baby girl at the end of November. So whenever this podcast comes out, we might already be in it. We might have already welcomed her to the world. You're trying to determine, at least for me, and I want to get some opinion and some advice from you. At least for me, we now have our own companies. I'm still in the legal community as an adjunct professor at the law school. So I'm trying to determine, how do I want to raise my little girl? How do I want to split my time? How do I want to focus and obviously not kill your newborn? Because that's a big part of it that terrifies me. And there's so much dynamic to it. And everybody who has a kid has sound advice, but everybody has their own advice. Some of it differs. Some of it is the same. So trying to pick and choose what will work for us, as well as juxtaposing that against what's actually necessary. What is the rule that applies to every child everywhere? So I will open it up with a question to you. and maybe you want to baseline with your kiddos, but you have two kids, your journey to being a father is a little bit different from the ordinary individual. So baseline there, and then just from a general perspective, 30,000 foot view, what's it like?
So for those audiences that are new, I have a son that's 4 years old. He was born via surrogacy. Actually, my husband's best friend carried him for us. And then our second is our daughter. She was born via adoption. And so both kids came expected, but unexpectedly. So the old saying where you can prepare as much as you want, but once you have kids, it goes out the window. It goes out the window. We could read as much as we want. I went through medical school and residency, and it could not have prepared me for parenthood. Everything that I learned as a physician, it went away as soon as I had the kid. I remember sitting in the hospital room, and my son was laying there, and it was, the first night that we were together as a family. Even though I know that I've been in the hospital so many times and I've held newborns so many times in my life, so many different babies, I still had to wake up every 15 to 20 minutes just to make sure he was still breathing, even though I know he was completely fine, but I always had to check. And it's just so funny that those new feelings, new stressors, new anxieties that come along with becoming a parent. And so that is the fun that you're going to get to enjoy here over the next couple of weeks to months, Nik. And I don't think it ever actually ends because the stresses just change over time. Like you said in our other podcasts, there's chapters in our lives, and this is definitely one of those. And there are so many different chapters to a kid's life. And so it is a fun journey, but it is a very hectic journey, and that's what makes it so fun and exciting.
For our listeners who have never had a firsthand experience with surrogacy, because I definitely haven't. I mean, you are the closest individual I've had who's gone through the process. What does that process look like? Because obviously you as a doctor, you understand from a medical standpoint what pregnancy looks like, but you also kind of have some skin in the game where this other individual is dictating how that pregnancy goes. And it's like, well, you're about to give birth to my child. How does that work? What did you go through? What was it like?
Surrogacy in general is very, very expensive. It's probably the first and most important thing you need to understand and realize is that the whole process is going to have ups and downs, and every part of it is going to require more and more money. So you want to make sure you have a good savings and that you have a very realistic idea of what it may potentially cost. With that said, my journey is actually not so traditional. Yes, it was a surrogacy, but it was actually a non-traditional surrogacy because the embryos that we utilized were actually donated to us by another couple. And so my son is not genetically related to either myself or my spouse or my partner. But my husband's best friend carried for us. So we knew her really well. So we wholeheartedly trusted her. We knew she wasn't going to drink. We knew she was going to eat very well. She wasn't going to smoke, or she doesn't smoke. And so she carried the pregnancy, and we had no worries at all. But for those who are trying to go through surrogacy themselves and they're trying to go through the very beginnings of it, it starts with making sure your partner has good sperm, right? Making sure the semen, the sperm counts, all that is appropriate, that you have the capability of creating a child. Second is then retrieving the egg. So from the female, you want to make sure that the eggs are healthy. You want to make sure that the eggs are able to accept the sperm. And then it goes through an insemination process where that's done in a lab. Everything gets extracted, then they get put together. And then you may collect 20, 30 eggs, but you may only have 5 or 7 or 10 that survive or actually are successful through that process. And then the next step is to actually test those embryos to see which ones are, I don't want to say good enough, but are genetically fit to survive a pregnancy. Now, this is where the genetics component, just how crazy science has come, how far it has come, is that you can now find out the gender. You can find out if there is any sort of genetic disorder or predisposition. And so those are things that you can then pick and choose and decide which embryos you want to use. The next step is then you can decide, do you want to do a single pregnancy, like a singleton, or do you want to do a dual? Do you want to have twins? Nowadays, majority of doctors prefer a singleton because it's safer for not only the surrogate, it's safer for the pregnancy itself and the baby. There are still families that try to do the direction, but again, most will lean towards the singleton. And so you do that, you start the process, you go through 9 months of it, and then you come out on the other end. Throughout that time, you can go meet your surrogate and you can do the ultrasounds with them, doctor visits. You want to do it in person, you can do it via FaceTime or a video. however you want to create that relationship with your surrogate. That's basically the quick and dirty of the process.
So with modern medicine, I think that those things are kind of just, I never knew. Like I never even knew the intricate details about surrogacy until we started having those discussions on it. Because if you don't come across it, you're usually not trying to familiarize yourself with it. So you go through the surrogacy. At any point, did you put your doctor hat on when you were dealing with the surrogate, or even when you were in? Because I assume you guys were in the room for the actual birth of your son, right?
No, because he came a month early, so we were not able to be there.
Oh gosh. Okay. So tell me about that experience. What was that like?
Well, she had a scare. She went to the emergency room, and then the emergency room sent her home. But she continued to have contractions, and so we told her to come back the following morning. She said she felt fine. We canceled the ticket because when we heard she was going into the emergency room, we had already purchased a ticket to fly out. But then she calmed us down. She's like, you know what? I think this is just false contractions. We'll just go ahead and have you stay. Well, she ended up going in the next morning, and then ended up actually going into labor. And so we couldn't get out there for another for 24 48 hours just because of flights and the timing of it all. We actually had my father-in-law drive to the hospital and actually was the first person to do skin to skin and be there for her. But of course, her husband was also there too. So it's not like she was lacking any support. We just missed out on his delivery is all. But we were there for our daughter's delivery. So we were there in the room as she was coming out.
Okay. So I have two questions for you. I want to go back to your son and then go to your daughter, because your daughter's a good segue into the original question. But with your son, and this is just lack of knowledge, lack of understanding. As soon as your son is born, technically, I would say that legally, he is now passed on. He is yours. So what obligations did the surrogate have during that period when you guys weren't there yet? You said your father-in-law showed up to help. Like, what obligations does she have? Could she have just been like, okay, my job's done, I'm leaving, and like leave the baby there at the hospital until you guys got there? Like, were there certain contractual obligations or anything of the sort?
Yeah, so we talked about briefly of the medical side of how a surrogacy works. There is also a very lengthy legal side of how a surrogacy works. Throughout the entire time when you are just planning the surrogacy, you do have to make sure you get an attorney, not only for yourself, but also for your surrogate. You come up with a contract and you lay out exactly what you just asked. What are you expecting out of the surrogate? How much are they going to be spending time at work? What if they have to take time off of work? How much are you going to pay them? What are they going to avoid? Like, we're going to make sure we restrict any sort of caffeine or coffee if you're very particular. You talk about vaccination status. Do you want them to get the COVID, the flu during their pregnancy? So those are all things that you have to lay out beforehand. And that's where you have the attorney to make sure that all the legal fittings are appropriate. And then once that's completed and signed on both sides, then you just follow that plan when the delivery comes. When labor ensues, then once baby comes out, then you follow the plan. For our personal surrogate, she was a very close friend. So it's not like she was going to want to leave. She wasn't trying to get out of there ASAP. However, we also understood she needed time to process what was going on. She had spent 8 months with her body changing. And then all of a sudden she's not going to be carrying a baby home. We asked her that, do you need time with baby at all? Do you want to breastfeed? She said she didn't want anything to do with it at all. She said she was very comfortable with us just handing baby over to us. And she said what made it easier for her to do that is because she's Hispanic, her husband is white, and our son came out Asian. So obviously she's like, yeah, it's definitely not genetically related to me. I feel comfortable handing baby over to you guys, the rightful parents. But we have a very close relationship with her, and we were so blessed to have her as our surrogate, and she was so understanding and throughout that entire process. But I know that there are some surrogates who do need the time to process. They went through a 9-month change in their entire body. They suffered, they stressed, worried, everything. And then all of a sudden they're sending a baby out, but they're not getting to bring that baby home. So sometimes they do want to spend a couple hours, maybe even a night, so that they can say what they need to say and cut ties or whatever process they need to make sure that whenever they hand baby over, that they are comfortable with it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, legally, baby is to the parents.
This is a topic that we can definitely have our own full-on podcast about. So if you guys want to hear more about surrogacy, whether it's the medical side, legal side, or Dr. Long's own experience, then definitely let us know in the comments. So back to my second question is, when you had your daughter, you're in the room, you're a doctor, you have doctors and nurses and medical staff. Was it hard to not just throw on your doctor hat, your career hat, and say, okay, hold on, I know exactly what's going on. I've delivered babies, I've dealt with newborns, newborns. Let me add my advice, my input, my opinion to the birth of your daughter.
There was so much going on that I didn't have time to put on that doctor hat. We were lucky that we were the only family there that was having a baby. It was around Christmas time. And so the hospital was completely empty and the nurses were amazing. The birth mother of our daughter was very welcoming. Her family was very welcoming. And we had a very good team. We had the doctor, and then the doctor actually also had residents. And so there was so many eyes on the birth mother as well as the pregnancy and the baby already that I didn't feel like I needed to. But I was more keeping it together because I needed to keep an eye out on not only my husband, but I needed to keep an eye out on birth mother's mom, birth mother's grandmother. So everyone else that was ancillary, not on the medical team, but on the other side, because they also were going through this process of they're going to see a baby, but they're not going to be able to raise the baby or bring the baby home. And so I was honestly focusing more on that aspect than the actual delivery itself. Yes, there was maybe a potentially hiccup here or there, but I knew that we were all in good hands at the end of the day. So I didn't feel like I needed to put on my doctor hat, but I really also didn't have time to put on my doctor hat.
And that one was unique because it was an adoption. You had mentioned in another podcast that you only had a 2-week notice that she was coming.
Our birth mother did not realize she was pregnant until 2 weeks prior to the delivery. She went in to get tested. And, I always get that reaction, but there are a lot of scenarios out there, whether that is lack of education, whether that is weight or denial, or maybe there's just so many other things that could be going on in that person's life that causes them to ignore signs of a pregnancy. Again, we are so thankful for her, and she gave us a beautiful daughter. We still actually keep in contact with her very closely. We send photos once in a while. And she actually came down to visit last year, right around when our daughter was 1 year old. And so that really solidified her comfort. Our daughter is living in a home, has a roof. She's getting fed. She's not malnourished in any way. And so since then, we've actually been the ones to reach out rather than her reach out to us. That visit really helped calm her nerves and just really made sure that she did the right thing.
It's very nice to hear you go through 2 very, very different types of pregnancy, and they both were very, very successful in the outcome. And it seems like everything was done with, first and foremost, the best interest of the child. And that it just seemed like it was, knock on wood, flawless. Like it happened the way it was supposed to happen. And now I've met your kiddos. They are absolutely adorable. They are so fun. They have their little personalities. I think that your daughter is going to run the show in the future, just by her very nature.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she is a total bully. So right now, we had a whole 2 to 3 months stint where every single day she was biting someone. And there are some days where someone was lucky enough that she would bite them twice in a day. And so that luckily has slowed down and actually stopped. We haven't had any teachers complain yet, but she had 3 months where if anyone went near her, tried to touch her toy, she was not having it. She's like, this is mine. Get away from me. And so she does that at home too. She doesn't bite at home, but she will push her brother. And her brother is twice her size. She does not care. She is going to push him over and jump on him and show him what she means. She can handle it. But actually, I have a question for you. So you obviously did it the old fashioned way. You and your wife, now you're pregnant. Did you struggle through that at all? Because I know that medically, statistically, we are seeing not only families having babies later in life, but they're starting to struggle more. Maybe they're not having a successful pregnancy on the first time. Maybe they're dealing with a miscarriage. Is that something too personal, or are you comfortable discussing any of that with us?
That is not too personal. Again, we've talked about this podcast as a way for us to be vulnerable and show like the human side of being a doctor, being a lawyer, and what we go through. Sometimes with our titles and our professions, people put us into a bucket, and they don't understand that we go through, the same thing that everybody else goes through. You might be arguing in a courtroom and your wife's on her way to the hospital because she's pregnant. Having those real conversations is important. We're over the age of 35. Medically, we've been told this, it's a little outdated, but anything over the age of 35 is considered a geriatric pregnancy, which you throw geriatric around my wife and she's like, how dare you? I am not geriatric. But medically speaking, you have these determinations that are just accepted throughout the medical field. We got very, very lucky in the sense that it came really quick. When we decided that we wanted to start trying to have a kid, it just happened. We were actually surprised with how fast it happened. One day we were talking to our OB about how best to prepare to get pregnant, because lo and behold, sometimes it's not just like the old fashioned way, right? You have to make sure that you're healthy. You have to make sure that you're taking the right vitamins, or you're taking the right prenatals, or you're getting enough sleep, or you're avoiding coffee, or this and the other, trying to maximize the efficiency of getting pregnant. So we talked to her OB, and her OB gave us, hey, this is what you should do as a woman. This is what you should do as a man. Because there were even rules for me, how to make sure that my sperm was viable and healthy, how to make sure that I was taking care of myself, the vitamins I should be taking. It's not just all on the woman, it's also on the man too. So we had that dynamic, and we started putting it into play. A lot of people go through this where women are on birth control, and she had to get off birth control, and we had to deal with the, how is her body going to bounce back from that? Was it going to be a couple months? Is it going to be a year or two? And I know that there are a lot of women out there that not only have to deal with the getting off of birth control and their bodies bouncing back, but just overall their bodies are going to do what their bodies are going to do. And we've had friends and family and relationships where we've seen how hard it is to get pregnant. And with us being quote unquote geriatric, we were concerned with the process. We were strapping down for the long road ahead. Fortunately enough, it happened. She got pregnant, and she didn't want to believe it. She was like, no, this isn't possible. And so there's all the pregnancy tests, and that's getting to the hospital. And then of course you're trying to play the game of, well, should we tell everybody or should we not tell everybody? That's a delicate position with any pregnancy, because miscarriages are a real thing. It's something that a lot of women go through. A lot of times it's very personal and people don't want to discuss it. And so you reserve the sharing of the news with family and friends and the public, your social media or whoever, because you don't want to share and then have the unfortunate miscarriage happen and then have to go back and try to explain to everybody what happened. I think there's some shame and embarrassment that comes along with that. And my heart goes out to all the women out there that have had to deal with that. Luckily, we didn't have to deal with that. Thank the Lord. Like that was something we didn't have to come to terms with over the course of like the first trimester. My wife was very much on edge because she knew that things can happen. You know, pregnancy, although it seems easy, has a lot of nuances to it. And so we were a little bit paranoid. You know, we were a little bit like, okay, what's going to happen? Are we doing everything right? Is she eating right? Is she getting enough rest? Her morning sickness was absolutely horrible. She was nauseous all day, every day. She wasn't sleeping right. At some point, she looked at me. She's like, "You smell. Get out of my room." And I'm like, "I just showered. You smell. You need to leave." And that's that level, right? And it's like, I don't want to cross a pregnant woman. I'm still afraid to cross a pregnant woman. But we were overall excited, and we are, you know, on our journey trying to prepare.
And so do you feel like things got delayed because you couldn't find the right partner? And do you think that that was due to law school and due to your professional goals that delayed you having kids? Because again, 30 over 35, a little older, society expects us to be married, have kids, maybe in our mid or late 20s. How did that fall in line for you?
This is a throwback to another one of our podcasts where we talked about dating and marriage as a lawyer and a doctor. I was patient. I was looking for my partner, but I was very patient. I wanted to find the right partner. As you get older, the thing is, and this is no disrespect to anybody listening, but there's baggage that exists. People get married, people get divorced, people have kids, people have crazy in-laws and crazy family members. There's drug addictions and alcohol abuse, and you're on your third marriage, or you have family issues, or your parents have gotten older and now you're taking care of your parents. And there's so many different areas of baggage. And I don't want to put baggage there as a negative connotation. It's just we're all dealing with our own stuff. I've said that before. We all have our own stuff that we're going through. So finding a partner that meshes well with what you're going through and what they're going through, and you guys can come together and deal with it as a team, as a unit, was very important. Well, I didn't meet that woman until my mid-30s, and that woman is now my wife. And I knew almost immediately when I met her why she was different than every other person I had dated before. And it just felt so natural. It just clicked. It just worked. I knew that she was going to be my wife. I knew I was going to propose within like a week of being together. It was just a matter of practicing patience and communication and all the stuff that we talked about in that other podcast. But yeah, I think the delay was you go through law school and then you go through trying to establish your career. For me, I've had multiple careers, so it was always jumping from one thing to the other, establishing myself there and trying to find somebody who fit into my world. and she just so happened to.
Very much a reality for people who are very driven in their careers and their professions. It is something is to delay family life. And I know that can sometimes be politicized as well. But again, we just want to make sure that we are realistic about expectations of our career paths. And it's right. I mean, in medicine, the average age that most people graduating medical school and then finishing residency, we are spending our 20s literally in school learning that entire time. So there's really not much time to actually go out and date, actually want to have kids. And if you did have kids, how are you going to take care of those kids? We're constantly reaching for our professional goals, but we're also trying to figure out how to balance that with starting a family so that we're not too old or not so old that we can no longer have kids or no longer be able to keep up with our kids. And so it's a very hard decision, and it's a very tough decision that is very personal. I definitely know many families and many women who were pregnant during medical school and residency. I have no idea how they did it because, again, I barely made it through as a man that didn't have to carry a baby for 9 months, but they were all amazing and they made it look so easy. And so it's possible, but it's hard. But it's also very important that you have a partner that understands the sacrifices that are needed to make sure that that is successful.
And to timeline it out, at least from a lawyer perspective, a legal perspective, you come out of college, you're 22 years old. You go into law school, that's 3 years. So by the time you're done, you're maybe 25, 20. Then the next 4 years, you're finding yourself, you're discovering yourself in your career, you're moving to a new place, you're meeting new people, you're dating. So let's say by the time you hit 30, you're ready to settle down. Well, you have one relationship that you're with somebody for 2 years and that goes awry. It goes bad, you break up. So now you're 32, 33. Your next relationship, if it also goes awry and it doesn't work out, now you're 35, 36. So you're already in it. You're already there. That's what I went through myself with, you try to invest in a long relationship to see if it'll pull out. And if it doesn't, then you're set back 2 or 3 years where now you're trying to find the next person that you have to have that investment to figure out what the future looks like. And it's very easy to fall into the cycle where you may have only dated seriously 3 people in long-term relationships and you still find yourself single without a partner while that clock is ticking. But I don't want anybody to feel pressure. Just be patient. You'll find your partner, as long as you work on yourself and love yourself and become secure with yourself and communicate and it really communicate on what you're looking for. It's easy to find a partner. And then that leads to our discussion, which we've been talking about, is kiddos, being able to find a trusted partner and have kiddos. At least as a divorce attorney back in the day, we used to joke that you're never really married until you have a kid, because you can get married and get divorced and go your separate ways. But as soon as you have that kid, you are attached at the hip forever. Doesn't matter if you get divorced, that child, as long as you are a parent that wants to be involved in your child's life, you will be at every birthday party. You will be at every holiday. You will split time. You will share custody. You will then go to, 30 years in the future, you'll be going to the wedding. You'll be sitting across from your ex-spouse. They'll have kiddos. You'll have grandkids. You're connected forever. So once you have the kids, that's when the marriage itself, that connection, that forever connection, that's when it really, really starts. And you got to consider that. You have to.
So then, as a lawyer or as someone that has gotten a law degree, what sort of advantages do you think you bring forth, or advantages that you think your child, a child of a lawyer, has compared to just a average non-lawyer family?
I don't want to toot any lawyer's horn. The threat of having a lawyer in the family, having an attorney in the family, exists for everybody. There's always a threat that you'll be talking to my lawyer. So as my kids or my daughter, my nephews and my nieces, as they're going through life, they will always be able to recognize the fact that if something happens within the law, if they commit a crime, if they get pulled over, if there is an issue at school, they can always call a lawyer. And for the most part, it's free legal advice. If somebody has an illegal search and seizure against my kiddo in school, I will play the lawyer card. I will play the attorney card. I will show up to that school. I will storm in and I will start making threats, because I am educated enough and capable enough to do so, because I understand how the law works. I understand how to work in and out of the law, what's okay, what's not okay. And I also know that demand letters and threats have some oomph to them. And the other side may not realize that what I'm saying in a demand letter might be very threatening, to look like there's going to be some bad repercussions on the other end if they don't adhere to what I'm saying. But that's on them to go seek out counsel and determine that. Having that backbone there will be good. I also worry, though, that my child or children are going to rely on that too much, to where, well, it'll be okay because mommy and daddy are get me out of whatever because my daddy's a lawyer. I absolutely do not want that. I want my child to be accountable, and I want them to stand on their own 2 feet and not think that daddy's going to come save the day because he's a lawyer and he can speak well to other people. I don't want that at all. What about you, with you being a doctor? Obviously, the benefit is that you have a built-in doctor at home. If anything happens with the kiddos, you're a doctor. But I have a sneaking suspicion that your husband doesn't always rely on what your medical advice is when it comes to your kiddos.
Being a doctor, I mean, I don't want to say I put a lot of injuries or medical issues to a lesser seriousness. I don't hold it to as serious as people may think, only because I know the outcome, what the outcome will be. I know how to triage. Is it as something to really worry about, something to go to the emergency room for, or something that I can deal with at home? That is one of the benefits. Is we've had lots of scrapes, we've had a lot of cuts and sutures, and I can do all that at home without having to go to an ear care. So that saved us a lot of medical bills. The one thing that I do worry about for our kids, though, is the privilege that they're growing up in. I grew up in an immigrant family, low income, didn't have very much. So I had to work through college to pay for my college. And my kid may not have the exact same experience. The last thing I would want them to come out and grow up to be is a very arrogant, ungrateful person in society. I need them to be able to contribute as much as every other person out there, be able to work with their hands, be able to have good conversations with all walks of life, and not be hoity-toity, nose up in the air. And that's the one thing that is hard to balance, because we all live a certain lifestyle. You know, we come to this income, but also you surround yourself with a certain set of people. You may not agree with all the families around you, but every doctor family raises their family differently. You don't necessarily want to be going on these lavish vacations every year, but you do want to go on some. And so that's that fine balance that I'm trying to figure out how to raise my kids and show them it takes hard work to actually become a good person. It's not just all money, which we do have at the moment. And that can quickly go away as well.
When your children come to the fruition of what daddy does, they're probably at 7, 8, 9. They're still trying to understand it, but they start ranking in their head. They're talking to their peers. They're talking to other kiddos. They're trying to figure out life, what is important, what is not important, and then also taking in the type of parenting style you may have in accordance with, well, we are in this nice house. My dad is a doctor. My friend lives on the other side of town. His dad is a blue collar worker. They may not be in a nice of a house. How do you navigate that? How do you ensure that your son or your daughter is not putting others down? There's debate. We were talking about Christmas earlier. I've seen Facebook posts from the community where around Christmas time, there's always a post that says, everybody please remind your children that, Santa may not bring the same gifts to the other children. And so instead of like bringing your classmates down, maybe you don't discuss it, or maybe you teach your kids why they shouldn't share one thing or another, because it impacts children. A 7-year-old is impacted by the Xbox that the other 7-year-old is given, when maybe all he or she got was a book. So there's like these different dynamics of how do you raise your kid to where, to exactly your point, they are working hard, they're not entitled, but also showing them hard work pays off. Daddy got to this point because daddy worked his ass off. He went through the trials and tribulations. He became a doctor. He sacrificed and sacrificed. He went into debt. He then was able to turn everything on its head when he became a doctor, and you can do that too, just with hard work. How do you show them that, but also hold them to be accountable?
That's where it's interesting, and where when you become a parent, which is soon, Nick, it's going to ebb and flow every single day. You're going to parent one way one week, and then it may change the next week, and it may change between each child that you have too, because every child is going to have a different personality, and they will react to the way you parent differently. And so I know that I want to teach my kids finances very early. And again, we're not talking about like learning how to earn a dollar, but learning how to save. Understanding that, hey, if we put this dollar here and wait a week, it may turn into $2. Like letting them understand that those small concepts about not getting everything right away just because you want it right now, delaying that gratification may actually be able to give you more benefit down the line. And so those small little lessons, I hope, will then bleed into future goals, future aspirations for them to become a better human being.
Follow-up question to that, Long. When we're talking finances, obviously when you're a lawyer and you're a doctor, like the student debt is real. We did not have trust funds. We did not have full scholarships. We accumulated debt. Do you think, to your point of teaching your kids the value of a dollar and making it $2, do you think the student debt has played a role in the financial take that you are then going to extend your kids? And second part, are you going to want your children to accumulate debt in order to achieve a higher education?
So yes, obviously the student debt played a big role in the way I went through life. I focused in on making sure that I was able to mitigate how much student loan I was taking out. So maybe I wasn't going to all the different shows or restaurants that a lot of my friends were going through or on the trips that they went on. I tried to take out as little student debt as I could. I worked as many jobs as I was allowed to or I was capable of. So those are things that I did. And those are the things that I do want to make sure that my kids appreciate and understand. And I do expect my kid to work during college. And I do expect them to take some student loans out. I absolutely do not want them to take out as much loans as I did. And that will be the privilege that I give to them is that they will take out some debt, but not as much as I do, nor will they take out as much debt as any of their colleagues or their classmates. We have started a 529. Obviously, that is a very important thing for new parents to consider if you're able to afford it, is to contribute to the 529 early. We actually started our 529s about 2 years before we were actually going to have our kids. And you're able to do that. And you just redesignate the name to the appropriate person once they are born and once they have a social security. So that's something that we can, again, dive deeper into if the audience is interested in hearing about the financial side of all of this, whether that's retirement or 529s and things. But yes, everything that I've been through obviously is going to mold how I raise my kids because I want them to be able to appreciate the same things, which is the dollar. I don't want them to just throw, $100 bill there and think it's just $100. Like they should understand where that came from and how it got to be there.
I remember seeing a video where a father was trying to teach his kiddos how taxes work. And so he gave them like a handful of Skittles and said, okay, now give me 5 of those Skittles. And then he took 5 and then, all right, give me 2 more. And then took that and then give me 1 more. And next thing you know, the kid had 3 Skittles in his hand and was like, why do you have all my Skittles? Well, that's how American taxes work. So the life lessons.
That's a really good way to explain it to a kid, though. I mean, I've seen a lot of good YouTube videos and parents teaching their kids about finances, and I'm absolutely going to be utilizing some of those little secrets that they've put out there because it is a really good way to introduce them. It would be hard to raise a kid not explaining those things and then expecting them to suddenly understand it in high school and in college. You have to expose them to it early. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot harder for them to understand it once they're older, once they can utilize money.
That's one of my worries, not to go on a rant about the educational system, but when we were in high school, we did not have a class that discussed taxes or financial literacy. And you go into college and mommy and daddy are still doing all this stuff for you. I would have really appreciated an education on taxes and financial literacy and saving and compound interest and the stock market almost as a requirement to life because those things are really, really important. And I didn't become comfortable with those concepts until maybe my late 20s as I was forced to do my own taxes and understand what was coming out of my paycheck when I had my legal profession. You have to teach your kids those concepts. You're doing them a disservice if you're not. I just wish that maybe schools were taking more of the role in teaching that. But again, you want something done, you got to do it yourself, right? You got to do it in the manner that you seem fit as a parent that works best with your child.
I'm shocked, Nick. I didn't realize you didn't do very much in college because I did all of those things.
Really?
Dealing with, yeah, because I had to. My parents don't speak very good English. Anything that came down to financial aid, filling out the FAFSA, getting all the tax forms in place, that was all me. Like I had to take care of all of that because my parents had no idea how to do it. There's no way they were going to get through an application on their own. So I learned all that really quickly, but also understanding that I'm working 3 different jobs. I have to be able to designate, okay, where's this money going to go? How much taxes are going to come out? Figuring all of that out ahead of time so that I could plan accordingly. But you know that about me. I'm a very type A person. So if I don't know something, I'm going to kind of try to seek it out, try to study it, learn it as best as I could. 5, 10 years later, I look back, I found out that I was probably making a lot of mistakes. I probably didn't do the right things here and there. And so there's always room to learn more. And you're right, though. I wish there was a course or a class would have made things so much simpler. I had to learn a lot of the financial savvy things, like the really nitty gritty stuff on how to build wealth and how to not necessarily buy stocks, but buy mutual funds and ETFs. And those are all things that I learned later in life. I knew briefly about them, but I also didn't have enough money to utilize those assets until now. But there are a lot of doctors still, even doctors and lawyers who come out and they are making the big bucks, but they actually don't know how to spend their money or save their money at all at 30, 35 years old.
Yeah.
We're lucky that we were able to fall into that community and learn more about it. But that's why I want to make sure we set our kids up for success by teaching them earlier in life.
Do you have an idea or a preference on when your kids are in high school or they're going to college, what jobs they should or shouldn't work? Like, because there's a little papa bear that goes on where, like, I don't want my kid in that field for this, that, or the other. Like, I'll be honest, I do not want my daughter at 18 in a club at 2 o'clock in the morning bringing bottle service to drunk people. Like, I don't want that. But I also think there's a benefit to maybe being a waiter or waitress and having to deal with a bunch of people and getting yelled at all day long. There's pros and cons. Have you thought about that at all for your kiddos as to like what you'd prefer them to get into and experience, at least as they're a teenager going into a young adult?
I always imagined my kids would do some sort of manual labor or some sort of service industry because, again, they have to understand the hands-on approach of those sort of jobs. You need to be able to appreciate what you maybe down the line they'll be able to afford to pay someone else to do it, but they need to understand how hard work is so that they can appreciate the help that they're getting. So that would be the expectation. But honestly, once they hit 18, if they're going to do what they're going to do, that's what my parents did. They were very much helicopter parents up until I hit 18. And I don't know why that's a magic number for them. But once they hit 18, their hands were off. Like they let me do whatever I want. I could have done anything and they were fine with it. And I don't necessarily think I'm going to go that exact approach. I'm not going to be helicopter on them for that long. I want to give them some room to breathe, but I also want to make sure that I'm guiding them in a direction so that they can make some of the mistakes earlier on so that they can learn from them, but maybe not make as big of mistakes that I made.
I agree with you. I think that doing something with your hands, some sort of service industry. I mean, when I was in high school, I was a referee for youth sports and I was a lifeguard. Those were my 2 big jobs. And it was a dynamic of understanding the importance of responsibility, especially with being a lifeguard. People at the pool are looking at you as a safe haven. If something goes down, if somebody's injured, if somebody's drowning, you are to save someone's life. And that was extremely important. I learned a lot of life lessons there. And to your point, it's just how can we get our kids to work in areas or take courses or engage in education or community groups that just makes them a better person and makes them contribute to society. How can you contribute to society and appreciate what you have, not come across like you have a silver spoon and you've never worked a day in your life?
And actually, that question you asked me leads into my question for you. Do you feel like you want your kids to be a specific type of professional? Do you want them to be a professional? Is there a career in mind that you want to maybe push them in? Because I know my personal choice and I know what the doctor community, I know that there's been a shift. And so I want to talk more about it, but I also want to hear your stance on it.
I've said this before, but I just want them to be happy in whatever they choose. And maybe that's the value of us being successful and being able to provide that safety net. Because not a lot of people get that safety net. Not a lot of people have parents that can provide the support to then go pursue things that you want to do. I mean, even with law school and myself, like I had family support. I lived at home throughout all of law school because I don't know if I could have afforded to go to law school and take out the debt. And there was a lot there that my family provided to me. And I want to be able to provide that same outlet for my kiddos to where when they decide to pursue a passion, I can either afford to help them or point them in the right direction. I don't want them to just be a lawyer because daddy's a lawyer, or get into real estate because mom and dad are in real estate. I want them to pursue what they want, but I also want it to be beneficial to society. This is nothing against people that don't take this path, but if my kid decides that they are going to go be a drug dealer and they're passionate about being a drug dealer, absolutely not. I don't want that for my kid. There's repercussions to that. If they decide that they're just going to take advantage of what society has to offer, I also disagree with that. I want them to work hard and know their value and put something into society. I want them to contribute. So as long as they have a passion and they're finding a way to contribute and making a name for themselves, I'm okay with whatever they decide to do. Granted that it's within reason, as long as it's legal, as long as it's not hurting anybody, I'd be okay with that. But same question to you. Do you want a son or daughter to be a doctor? Do you want them to be in the medical field?
With the direction that medicine is heading, I do not necessarily want them to become a physician. There are other careers within the medical field that will probably work out better for them if they pursued it, being less student debt, less time commitment, but coming out making financially the same amount of money, but also getting the similar, if not very similar, prestige. And so, again, if they're very passionate about medicine, then I would be completely fine with them going in. But the funny thing is that I'm part of a lot of doctor communities, physician communities online on Facebook. And a lot of doctors and physicians are actually pushing their kids more into the trades because that's honestly where society's lacking. We need more tradesmen, but tradesmen also make very good incomes for the amount of education that they have. They're not having to dedicate 5-10 years of their lives to anything. They're dedicating a handful and then they're coming out and making good money. And everyone is always going to need a plumber, is always going to need an electrician. It's not something that's going to go away. And so that's the climate and the landscape that I'm seeing, is that most physician parents are actually not pushing their kids into medicine because, again, a bigger topic that we'll have on another episode is the landscape of medicine is pushing the physician lower and lower on the totem pole, paying us less and less, but expecting more and more out of us. So there's more responsibilities, higher stresses, and the time commitment and student debt and the amount of money, it's just not worth it sometimes. Obviously, if you're really passionate about it, like I am, I would never trade anything for what I do now. Like I love what I do and I would do it again. But that's not necessarily something that I would push my kids in. I'm not going to tell them you have to be a doctor. I'm not going to be my dad. My dad told me I was always going to be a doctor. He was lucky that I wanted to be one, but I would never do that for my kids. I would just tell them, pick something that you're passionate about and just put your whole heart into it and be the best that you can be in it.
And I think that's not just medicine, that's corporate America that's doing the burnout, where everybody wants things faster, more efficient, more this, that. They want you to work harder, but pay you less and get, 60 hours worth of work done in a 40-hour work week. That complaint it's rampant in just professional services today. And then to the point of just the doctors and the medical profession, I do think that we live in a day and age, again, where everybody has an opinion. So it's really easy to fall into a field like that and just deal with the constant stress. Like it's constant stress. Nobody's ever happy. There's always something to worry about. Whether it's being sued, like in our medical malpractice discussion, whether it's having PTO and burnout and that podcast discussion, there's so many different variables that leads to happiness as a adult in your career that you pick, that it's only natural that we look out for our kids and want to push them in the right direction. Now, to your point about tradesmen or tradeswoman, however you want to say it, I always used to joke that it's those blue collar individuals that come off as sneaky rich. Because what happens is that they get a trade, and just like a lawyer, similar to a private practice doctor, you get to set your own hourly rate. And when the toilet floods and it's New Year's Eve or Christmas Day or Thanksgiving and you need somebody there, they can name their own price. They're going to come and do a good job. And so what can end up happening there is they learn the trade, and then after a few years of doing it, then they build their own team. Like I've seen my dad do it with his entrepreneur spirit, where he learned how to do something, and then after a while, he's got 5 people that he's taught underneath him that are all doing the same thing. And now he is the boss, he is the manager, he is the owner of the company, and he's getting the spoils of what he's created. From a educational standpoint, and I definitely want your opinion on this, we went from a place of, hey, grow up to be a doctor, grow up to be a lawyer, grow up to be a business person. And then STEM hit. And now it's all about, we need the computer sciences, we need the science, the technology, the engineering, the math, we need all that. And now, to your point, it's coming back around where everybody's STEM now. So the field is saturated, but tradespeople, you're always going to need them. Until you get the robot that knows how to fix a toilet, you're always going to need them, but you're still going to need somebody to fix that robot to tell them how to do the toilet. I'm completely in agreement with you. Tradespeople, blue collar workers, they are extremely important to society because we are blind to a lot of what they do, whether it's climbing a sewer, climbing on a power line, fixing a toilet, fixing a roof. There's a lot of importance to that.
And again, something that I hope that I can instill in my kids is that it takes a whole village to raise a family, to raise kids, right? And that is included in all the different professions in a community. It takes all of us to be able to uplift our community, to be healthy, be happy, be successful. We are only as strong as our weakest link. That can bolt really well with this conversation that we're having. But another thing that I am interested to hear is, how do you think your lifestyle or the amount of time that you spend with your family and kids and your career goals, how does that interact with each other? Do they fight each other? Do you feel like they align very well? Do you see yourself pivoting again? Because I know you've changed your career choices so many times. But more interestingly is whether or not you think you could have sustained a lawyer career and still had kids and do what you want and spend enough time.
That's a great question. My wife and I actually had that discussion on our way back from New Orleans. We eloped in the Bahamas, and then we had a party in New Orleans a few months after that. And when we were driving home, we were talking about our future, and we were talking about how our careers would impact our kids. And that's the decision I made to start a real estate investment company, because I determined that I wanted to be my own boss. I was tired of the rat race in corporate America. Obviously, I was tired from being a lawyer. That led me into aerospace and defense. Then exiting my aerospace and defense career was because I wanted to feel like I own my own time and that I can make the decision about how I can be a good father and a good partner to my wife. And with the way my career was going, it was more hours, more requirements, more weekends, later nights, earlier mornings. And I was tired of the demand there. We said, hey, we're going to take a risk. We're going to start our own companies. And that's going to allow me that if I want to be at every single OB appointment, I can be at every single OB appointment. I can make that call with the understanding that I might have to work later on in the evening, but it's my decision. It's her decision. We can work at making this decision together. If I need to work on the weekends, I know it's because I took Monday or Tuesday off because I wanted to run around with the kiddos, or I wanted to go to their sports game or their recital, or go to, parent teacher night. Now I'm in the position that I can make that call. And I know a lot of people aren't in that position, or they're afraid to make that jump. But I feel very fortunate that I crossed that bridge of fear to do it, because now I can really, really, really provide the support as a father and as a husband. Do know, though, that as this thing grows, I need to also be very careful about not letting it take over, because it's very easy when you're sitting there. And I've done it to my wife before. Hold on, honey, I'm just going to take one more call for the day. You take that last call, it ends up being an hour and a half, and your wife has been sitting there by herself watching TV, and now it's time to go to bed. I've learned from those lessons, and I want to keep learning and keep applying my adjustments to my own company to make sure I don't fall back into that path, especially when little girl is here and I'm working and I'm trying to grow a business and raise her and be a good partner. That there might be times where I say, hey, wait, I got to take one more call because that's one more paycheck I can get. But realistically, it'd probably be more beneficial to not make that call, leave it for the next day, and spend time raising my little girl.
From a doctor perspective, that is one of the benefits of being a doctor, the ability to control some of your schedule. I do like that my prior job, I was working longer hours. I didn't have kids yet. I was working 12-hour days. I was going in the hospital, the clinic, picking up extra shifts. But I can now pivot to more of a clinic role where it is more of a 9 to 5 job. I know that those are my set hours. I still have to sometimes bring work home, whether that is being on call and answering phone calls for patients. But I at least know that I can designate these evening hours to my family and to my kids. The other benefit is that if I wanted to pivot again and then maybe I wanted to do shift work, maybe I wanted to do something where it's everything that is done at work stays at work. I don't have to bring anything at home at all. And that would be something like the emergency room or the urgent care. And I can do that. And so my career has allowed me the luxury of being able to pivot and make those changes if I ever wanted to. I like being employed though because of the benefits, right? The benefits of having a 401k or 403b, retirement set out, but also the health insurance. I've talked with my partner and we've discussed potentially down the line letting me cut back on hours just for sustainability. And I was given a timeline that I was not allowed to cut back for at least 10 to 15 years. So there is already that understanding and that communication that we have. But again, it's a communication that we have and come to that we understand that yes, I'll be working another 10 to 15 years, but you also have to understand that you will then have to take potentially days off if our kids are sick. I may not be able to take them off at a whim, but we will have the health insurance. We will have all these other benefits that come along with it.
I appreciate that sentiment. That goes to, we did a lot of hard work up front to have the ability to call our shots later in life. I had this motto in aerospace and defense where it was, don't let present Nik screw over future Nik. Put future Nik in the best possible position to win. So what you're doing right now, it may seem redundant, it may seem annoying, it may seem like too hard of work, but what the building blocks, the foundation, the compound interest from your work ethic, then collectively gets to a point where 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, you're going to be 15 years older anyway, but why not put yourself in the best position to call your own shots and do your own thing and achieve the goals that you want and pursue the career aspirations that you want to pursue, and then do all that with your partner. So I can definitely relate to that sentiment.
Very good conversation on having kids, what it's like to go through law school, medical school, thinking about it and how it could affect our long-term goals. But is there anything else you feel like you wanted to add at all?
No, I'm excited for baby girl. You guys will go on this journey with me, as like I'm sure I'll have input. It'll be, hey Nik, how was your night? And I'll say I did not sleep, or she had a blowout and I had to clean it up, or my wife is yelling at me because I did not clean the bottles properly. I'm sure you guys will experience all of that with me, but I'm excited for the journey. I'm excited for the kids. And if you guys have any parenting advice, please leave it in the comments. I would love to see some of it, because parenting advice, especially when it's over the spectrum of a bunch of different parenting experiences, is very interesting. And so I'm open to it. But with that, we appreciate you guys tuning into the Medical Legal Brief, where medicine meets the law. I'm with Dr. Long. This is Lawyer Nik. We appreciate any engagement that you guys want to bring our way. So share, like, follow, comment, follow us on social media. We're on TikTok, we're on Instagram. We also have a LinkedIn page. So however you guys get your information, your podcasts, tune in. We're on Spotify and YouTube as well. With that, thank you guys very much, and we appreciate you guys tuning in. Have a good one.
Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we're lawyers. No, this podcast is not medical or legal advice. Do not take anything we say as a reason to perform your own heart surgery, represent yourself in court, or diagnose your neighbor's rash. This is for entertainment only. Think of it like hanging out with your smartest, wittiest friends, not a substitute for an actual appointment. If you act on anything we say without talking to your own professional, that's on you. Seriously, don't do that.